Welcome to the deep dive. If you are listening right now, you're likely someone who is always looking for that next edge.
Yeah, that next mental model.
Exactly, that tweak to make your day-to-day life function just a little bit smoother. And today, our mission is to deliver exactly that. We are going to extract the most actionable, mind-shifting insights from James Clear's massive bestseller, Atomic Habits.
It is arguably one of the most foundational texts for anyone interested in continuous improvement. I mean, the promise of the book is straightforward. It offers a proven framework for building good habits and breaking bad ones.
Right.
But the way it delivers on that promise, that is what makes it so enduring.
It really is a treasure trove. There are the 4 laws of behavior change, habit stacking, identity-based habits.
Yeah.
We could easily spend hours dissecting the entire methodology.
Oh, absolutely.
But we know your time is precious, and we want to give you something you can use the exact moment this audio finishes. So today, our deep dive is laser focused on just one specific part of this book. We are zooming in entirely on chapter 6.
Which is a brilliant place to focus, honestly. If you only internalize one concept from the entire book, the ideas presented in this specific chapter offer, well, arguably the highest return on investment.
Yeah, and here is the hook. The core premise I really want you to hold on to as we get into this material. We constantly beat ourselves up. You set a goal, you fall off the wagon a week later, and immediately that internal monologue starts.
Oh yeah, the guilt.
Right. You think, I just lack motivation. Or, if I only had more willpower, I could finally stick to this routine. We default to blaming ourselves. We assume our internal character is the problem.
Which is so common.
It is. But according to the science laid out in this chapter, we are looking at the completely wrong culprit. The real secret to changing your life isn't pumping yourself up. It isn't finding some hidden reserve of willpower. It's actually changing the physical space around you.
It is incredibly validating to realize that the constant internal battle to just try harder is largely unnecessary. What we are going to explore today removes that heavy burden of willpower right off your shoulders.
Yeah,
It really is. By the end of this deep dive, you are going to view your living room, your office desk, and your kitchen in a completely different light. You will start to see them not just as rooms where things happen, but as active behavior-shaping machines.
Okay, let's unpack this. James Clear introduces this central idea that the environment is this invisible hand-shaping human behavior. He points out something that seems obvious in retrospect, but is profound when applied to our daily routines. Despite all of our unique individual personalities, whether you consider yourself highly driven, laid back, introverted, or extroverted, we all tend to act incredibly predictably in certain environments.
We have this ingrained cultural bias to believe that our habits are strictly a product of who we are on the inside. We constantly elevate personality and discipline.
Right, the whole hustle culture thing.
Exactly. But the reality is that the most common form of change is external. We are constantly being molded by the world around us. And to understand why, we actually need to look back to 1936.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, there was a psychologist named Kurt Lewin who formalized this concept into a simple but truly revolutionary equation. B equals FP, comma E.
Behavior is a function of the person in their environment.
That's the one.
Let's break down the mechanics of that equation for everyone listening, because it really is the crux of the whole chapter.
So the equation states that your behavior, the B, is not just a result of you, the person, the P. It is the result of you combined with the specific space you are occupying, the environment, the E.
The E is the silent partner.
It's an equal, if not dominant, partner in the equation of what you choose to do next. Before Lewin, the prevailing thought in psychology was largely that human behavior was driven by internal traits. Lewin argued that you simply cannot separate the person from their surroundings.
So if I'm understanding the implication here, we spend nearly all of our time and energy agonizing over the P in that equation.
Yes.
We buy self-help books to fix our mindset, we listen to motivational speakers to fix our drive, and we completely ignore the E.
That is the ultimate tragedy of how most people approach habit change. They fight a losing battle against their own psychology while leaving the environment completely untouched.
The book brings this down to earth with some really relatable examples that illustrate how effortlessly the E controls the P.
Right.
Think about walking into a church. Why do people immediately lower their voices and whisper?
It's instant.
Right. It is not, because every single person who crosses the threshold is suddenly struck by an internal motivation to be a quiet, reflective individual. The environment itself is dictating the action.
Absolutely.
Or consider walking down a dimly lit street late at night. You automatically act wary, your posture changes, you might walk a little faster, your senses are
And
heightened.
yeah, whole physiology shifts.
You aren't consciously giving yourself a pep talk to be cautious. The external world is literally pulling that behavior out of you.
Those examples perfectly illustrate Lewin's point. And perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence shared in the source material to illustrate this on a larger scale is a famous study conducted at the Massachusetts General Hospital cafeteria.
This case study is fascinating. It proves how completely oblivious we can be to the environment's influence on our dietary choices.
The setup was brilliant in its simplicity. The researchers wanted to improve the eating and drinking habits of the thousands of hospital staff and visitors who cycled through that cafeteria every single day.
A huge undertaking.
Huge. But they imposed a strict constraint on themselves. They were not allowed to change anyone's internal motivation.
Wow.
They couldn't talk to the patrons, they couldn't put up warning signs about the dangers of sugar, and they certainly weren't going to rely on anyone's willpower to make healthier choices.
They completely removed the P from the equation and only focused on the E.
Precisely. All they altered was the environment design, specifically the architecture of choice within the room. Originally, the refrigerators located right next to the cash registers were stocked exclusively with soda.
Which is pretty standard for a cafeteria.
Right. So the researchers started by simply adding bottled water to those main refrigerators. But the critical move was that they didn't stop there. They expanded the footprint of the water.
They put it everywhere.
Yes. They added baskets of bottled water next to the food station stationed throughout the entire room. In the book, there is a great diagram featuring the shaded boxes that maps out exactly where the new water was placed in relation to the traffic flow.
So they essentially blanketed the environment with a better option. But I imagine some people might argue that if someone really wants a soda, they're just going to walk the extra 10 feet to get a soda, right?
You would think so, if you believe motivation overrides environment, but the results proved otherwise. Because the amount of water in the environment was increased and made more proximate to the patrons, behavior shifted naturally and dramatically. Over the course of the study, soda sales dropped significantly while water sales skyrocketed.
Without a single word spoken to the customers?
Not a single word. Nobody had an internal epiphany about the importance of hydration while standing in line. They chose a product not because of what it was, but simply because of where it was.
Just because it was right there in front of them.
The proximity and visibility of the water removed the friction of the choice.
What's fascinating here is how this connects to the deeper mechanics of our daily habits. We often think of a habit as being triggered by a very specific, isolated thing.
Like a notification.
Exactly. Your phone buzzes, you check it. But the book introduces a critical nuance about how our brains actually process these triggers over time.
This requires a quick look at the habit loop. Every habit goes through 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. We usually focus on the cue as a singular object, but what Chapter 6 reveals is that gradually our habits become associated not just with that single isolated trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior.
The brain doesn't just see the object, it sees the whole room.
It maps the entire situation. You aren't just reacting to a notification on a screen. Your brain is processing the lighting in the room, the time of day, the specific chair you are sitting in, and the people around you.
It's taking it all in.
Yes, and eventually the context itself becomes the cue.
This makes so much sense when you apply it to everyday scenarios. Think about your own kitchen right now. The source material points out that if you walk into your kitchen and see a plate of cookies sitting right there on the counter, you are highly likely to eat one.
Very likely.
And the crazy part is, you might not have even been hungry. You weren't thinking about cookies while you were in the living room.
No, not at all.
But the context, the specific room, combined with the visible item, became the cue that generated the craving.
The visual cue in that specific environment entirely overrides your internal state of hunger or your long-term health goals. Your brain recognizes the kitchen counter, sees the cookies, and runs the script it has run 100 times before.
Or think about the classic office setup. If the communal table in the break room is always filled with donuts and bagels, it is incredibly difficult not to grab one when you walk by to get coffee.
It's almost automatic.
Your behaviors are literally changing depending on the room you happen to be standing in. So for everyone listening, I want you to take a second and really evaluate your own spaces, your desk, your living room, your car. The book highlights that a stable environment where everything has a dedicated place and a specific purpose makes it incredibly easy for habits to form.
Which brings up a very powerful, actionable takeaway for the listener.
Mm.
Because habits are so deeply intertwined with the context of a space, it is significantly easier to build new habits in a new environment.
The new environment hack.
Ex-
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. That sounds great in theory, but most of us can't just move to a new house or find a new coffee shop every time we want to start reading a book or eating better. How practical is this, really?
It's a fair question. And the beauty of this concept is that you don't need to uproot your life. You just need to repartition it.
Repartition it.
Right. When you try to build a new habit in your current unchanged environment, you are constantly fighting against old established cues. If you have spent the last 3 years sitting on your living room couch, watching television and eating junk food, that specific couch is now a massive contextual cue for that exact behavior.
The couch essentially yells at you to turn on Netflix.
Metaphorically, yes. It really does. If you suddenly decide you want to use that same couch to start reading dense nonfiction, you are going to experience massive internal friction.
Because the brain is confused.
Your brain is expecting the TV and the snacks, and it will flood you with cravings for them. But if you create a new context, say, by moving a different chair into the corner of the room that is dedicated only to reading, you aren't fighting those old cues.
You have created a blank slate.
Exactly. If you want to change who you are, start by changing where you are, even if that just means designating a new corner of the room, one space, one use.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because everything we've talked about so far is about building good habits, making the cues obvious, rearranging the room, adding the water to the shaded box.
The positive side of the equation.
Right. But what about the habits we are desperate to break? What about when we feel like an absolute failure because we just cannot seem to control ourselves around our bad habits? This is a massive pain point for so many people who feel like they're constantly losing a battle against their own impulses.
It is arguably the most common frustration with behavior change, and James Clear addresses this misconception head-on. The big reveal here is that our entire cultural understanding of willpower is fundamentally flawed.
Flawed how?
We look at highly disciplined people, the ones who eat perfectly, work out daily, and never seem distracted, and we assume they possess some magical, endless reservoir of self-control that we simply lack.
We put them on a pedestal. We think they're just built differently.
But the research suggests something entirely different. People who appear to have high self-control do not actually have stronger willpower.
They don't.
No, they simply spend less time in tempting situations. That is the secret. It is always easier to avoid temptation than it is to resist it.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It is easier to avoid temptation than to resist it.
Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. Willpower is a finite resource. You might be able to muster the mental energy to resist that box of donuts in the break room once or twice or even for a whole week.
But eventually...
But if you're sitting next to that box every single day, eventually your willpower will deplete. You will have a stressful day, your defenses will be down, and you will give in. You cannot override your baseline desires every single time you are confronted with them.
So instead of trying to summon a new, heroic dose of willpower every time you want to do the right thing, your energy is far better spent optimizing your environment to remove the need for willpower altogether.
Which brings us to the inversion of the first law of behavior change.
Oh.
If the rule for building a good habit is make it obvious, the rule for breaking a bad habit is the exact opposite. You must make it invisible.
Make it invisible. It sounds almost too simple, but the application of this is incredibly effective. The book lays out some very specific rapid-fire tactics that you can implement literally today to start breaking bad habits just by hiding the cues. Let's look at how this actually works in practice.
Take the classic productivity killer, smartphone.
Oh, yeah?
If you cannot seem to get any deep work done because you are constantly distracted, the solution isn't to tell yourself to focus harder while the phone sits right there on your desk.
Right, because just seeing the phone creates a cognitive load. You are actively spending energy ignoring it. So the tactic is to leave the phone in another room for a few hours. Make it invisible.
The physical distance removes the visual cue, which prevents the craving to check it from ever arising. What about the psychological habits? So many people struggle with constantly feeling like they aren't enough or they get caught in comparison traps.
This is a huge one. The book suggests that if you are continually feeling inadequate or envious, you need to stop following social media accounts that trigger those specific emotions.
Yes.
Don't rely on your willpower to not feel jealous when you see someone's highlight reel. Remove them from your feed entirely. Make the digital cue invisible.
Another great example from the text involves screen time. If you feel like you're wasting way too much time watching television every night, the most effective solution isn't to hide the remote. It's to physically move the TV out of the bedroom or the main living area.
You completely change the context of the room back to sleep and rest rather than entertainment. And it applies to finances too. If you are spending way too much money on impulse buys or electronics, you have to quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear.
Exactly, you cut off the source.
Unsubscribe from the promotional emails that trigger the desire.
And finally, for those who find themselves playing too many video games, don't just turn off the console and leave it sitting out under the TV. Unplug it, wrap up the cords, and put it in a closet after each use.
The friction of having to set it up again makes it so much easier to just do something else.
What all these tactics share is a fundamental understanding of how to hack the habit loop. The cue is the catalyst. It triggers the craving. If you remove the cue, the craving often never surfaces.
Wow.
You are cutting the habit off at its absolute source. It is genuinely surprising how effective these simple changes can be. You don't need to fight a grueling internal battle if the enemy isn't even on the battlefield.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a lot of ground today from a very specific, highly impactful part of this book. Let's synthesize this so you can walk away and use it right now.
Yeah, let's bring it together.
The biggest takeaway from Chapter 6 of Atomic Habits is this. You need to stop trying to artificially pump up your motivation. Stop relying on sheer willpower to resist the cookies sitting on the counter or the distractions buzzing on your desk.
It's a losing game.
Willpower is a finite resource, and if you rely on it as your primary defense, you will eventually lose. Instead, your goal is to become the architect of your environment. You want to deliberately design the spaces where you live and work so that the cues for your good habits are glaringly obvious and the cues for your bad habits are completely invisible.
It is a profound shift from being a passive victim of your surroundings to being the active designer of them. And as we close out this deep dive, there is a final lingering thought I want you to consider.
Okay.
We have spent this entire discussion focusing on physical spaces, your kitchen counters, your living rooms, office cafeterias, and reading chairs. But think for a moment about the digital environment that you carry in your pocket all day long.
Oh, that's a great point.
If, as Kurt Lewin established, environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior, what are the invisible digital cues sitting on your phone's home screen right now? When you unlock your device, what are the very first thing you see?
Right.
Because whatever it is, that specific layout is meticulously designed to trigger a behavior. What kind of person is your current digital environment designed to turn you into?
That is a phenomenal question to leave on. Look at your phone screen right after this deep dive ends. Look around the room you are sitting in and ask yourself if those spaces are designed for the person you actually want to become. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the insights of Atomic Habits. We hope you take these concepts and start architecting an environment that makes your success entirely inevitable. Catch you on the next one.